We had a very, very busy weekend in the world of the NHL, and that means an extra spicy Monday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Erik Karlsson, the shakeup in the Eastern Conference, Kyle Dubas off the top rope once again, and Tom Wilson inks a long-term extension with the Washington Capitals, and what's going on with Jake Guentzel, all on today's episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Buckle up, hockey heads, and here we go. The official push to the puck drop on the upcoming NHL and fantasy hockey season is here, and that means on the Monday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast, we have everything that you need to know that's affecting your fantasy squad from around the world of the NHL newsreel. It was a busy few days over the weekend. Happy Holiday Monday to our friends north of the border who are celebrating, and our friends all around the world. Thank you for tuning in and making us your first listen every single day. On today's episode, I have a lot to get to. I am riding solo today. Steele is a little vacation bound over the weekend, but hitting the links, I believe. He is a pretty good golfer, so he's got to get that practice in. But you know I'm here getting my reps in on the fantasy realm. Tom Wilson signing the long-term extension with the Washington Capitals. His fantasy value we're going to break down. What's going on in Washington this year we have to take a very close look at, because we are going to talk about two teams on today's episode in the Penguins and Capitals, where their window for winning with these cores is shrinking. The Pittsburgh Penguins have a lot of things going on with this franchise. Jake Guentzel out 3 months. He's going to miss the start of the season. Let's analyze this with the keeper dynasty lens. Do you still keep him? I'll hit you with my takes on that. And of course, number 65, Erik Karlsson, 3-time Norris Trophy winner. I'll spit these words out, people. He goes to the Steel City in a mega swap. I'll break it all down, the pieces, 3-team deal, fantasy fallout, and otherwise. And thank you so much for joining me for the Monday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Let's get right into this Tom Wilson news, because when I was prepping for today's show, one of the first things I needed to come on here and say about fantasy value of players of Tom Wilson's ilk and caliber, and say what you will about his ability to get under the skin of his opponent, he is the kind of guy that not only do you really want on your team on the ice, you want him on your fantasy team when he is at full tilt. He is one of those guys that usually when you look up at the standings, and I say this a lot, he is one of those kinds of guys that most GMs in the top few slots have at least one or two of. I'm talking the power forwards, the Tom Wilsons, Evander Kanes, both Kachucks. And, you know, there are some defensive pieces that do it too. Rasmus Dahlin bringing the body. Even Luke Schenn can sometimes do it. These are the pieces that winning fantasy teams have. Tom Wilson signs a 7-year, $45.5 million contract extension on Friday. He now will continue his whole career, basically, you know, being drafted by the Washington Capitals. I see him probably retiring as a Washington Capital. Anyway, that's down the road. What's now is he still holds a ton of fantasy value. And when he's healthy, he is just one of those guys that I'm telling you, again, this year, if he's healthy and he can go back to that 52-point ways that he was 2 seasons ago, 24 goals, 28 assists, 98 penalty minutes. He has 240 hits, 55 block shots. The injuries caught up with him last year, but he still brought value big time in those 33 games he was in the lineup. 13 goals, 9 assists for 22 points, 78 penalty minutes. He still managed to lead the team last year in penalty minutes. I really like Tom Wilson as a fantasy piece. My concern here, and this is what I also had to mention, is what's going on with the Washington Capitals. This is a Metro division that, hello, we just saw what happened with the Pittsburgh Penguins and Erik Karlsson. And yeah, Jake Guentzel is going to be out. But this is a really tough division. And not to mention just the Eastern Conference in general. This is not a new thing. We've seen the Eastern Conference beef up over the last, I'd say, 2 or 3 seasons, maybe even 4, really becoming that power conference. Carolina, Jersey, New York, Boston, Toronto, Tampa Bay, Florida, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Ottawa, and Detroit we're not even talking about. And all 3 of those teams, in my opinion, are just as good enough to make the playoffs. Let's get to those conversations later in the month where Steele and I will break down all the predictions for the upcoming season that you need, including awards, positional breakdowns, and of course, a bunch of mock drafts. So make sure you like, subscribe, drop us a 5-star review if you are listening on Spotify, Apple, wherever you at. We really appreciate the feedback, and it helps us get better and helps us feed you guys with the information to dominate your draft. And to get back to Tom Wilson and the Washington Capitals, look, this is a team that struggled to score last year. They were 20th in the league in total goal scoring. And Tom Wilson being out, obviously, it played a part in that, but he isn't the straw that stirs the drink. We know it's Ovechkin, it's Kuznetsov, to a certain extent, Backstrom and Oshie, but they've got mileage on the body. Max Pacioretty comes in. He's got a lot of miles on the body as well, and injuries. But this team will still be competitive. They'll be on that playoff bubble, fighting for one of those playoff bubble spots. The back end, I actually don't hate. And before I move on to Jake Guentzel, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and it's kind of interesting that we're talking about the Penguins and Capitals. We're going to talk a little bit about Sid as well. This is the changing of the guard moment, and both of these teams are at one of those, impasse moments because they've been the pillars of success, at least in the Eastern Conference, for a number of years running. And I think you're going to see a real good battle between these two teams. That's a little sidebar, personal note. Caps are going to also be another team that I think is going to have to pick it up offensively. So their fantasy pieces that I mentioned, Oshie, Backstrom, Pacioretty, to a certain extent, Dylan Strome and Anthony Mantha in other formats, I still see value. But of course, if you are going to look at this team, it's Alex Ovechkin. On the back end, John Carlson. And don't sleep on Rasmus Sandin's ability to bring some offensive points. Tom Wilson, a healthy year out of him. I'm fine taking him definitely in the middle of the draft. I think he will have a bounce back year. So I'm going to say 7th, 8th round, maybe even a little later, depending on the format. Tom Wilson, a very valuable piece. Jake Guentzel, a very valuable fantasy piece. Both, of course, for the Pittsburgh Penguins on ice success and probably a lot of GMs out there listening. I'm going to break down that situation. His ankle injury, he's out, reevaluated in 12 weeks' time. We'll break that down. And Erik Karlsson, number 65, headed to the Steel City. That's a 3-time Norris Trophy winner, so we got to break that all down. But today's episode, my friends, is brought to you by our friends at AG1. You got to be talking about AG1 as one of the number one supplements that you can try. And it is something that Steele and I love using every single day as a daily foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I like it in the morning. I like it after working out. It gives you that boost and it makes me feel unstoppable. AG1 is a foundational nutritional supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health. It replaces your multivitamin, probiotic, and more in one simple, drinkable habit. All great athletes have one thing in common. They take care of their bodies, and a huge part of that starts with optimizing your overall health, and that's what you get with AG1. If a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplemental routine, you need to be trying AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1/NHL network. You got to be checking that out today. Friends, I miss my man Steele. He'll be back. Trust me. I know in the lead up to this fantasy season, there's going to be a lot of excitement. And over the weekend, that was case in point. I can tell the season's drawing near. I feel like a little kid. I am hype for hockey, but you got to focus in and really, the GMs that get the leg up on the competition are already tapped into everything that's happening in the league. And that includes Jake Guentzel's injury. Right ankle surgery. The forward is out. 12 weeks, going to be reevaluated at some point in October. This is obviously big news. And what I think immediately it means, and I'm going to bring up this Pittsburgh lineup here because I have about 400 tabs open, so bear with me, people. This is where I really miss my man Steele. The left side has a hole now in Pittsburgh. Obviously, there's some pieces that shuffled around in this Erik Karlsson trade. Michael Granlund on the move, and there's some things in flux in the forward group. But really, I think this means a really good opportunity for Riley Smith. Shout out to our boy, Michael Amato from Sportsnet.ca and the managing editor at goaliepost.com. Make sure you check out Amato on Twitter. Made a really good point. Riley Smith at the back end of your drafts now, most definitely worth a look because he's going to get to play the first month with Sid. He has proven in his career that he can bring it in that 50 to 60 point realm. He was already a valuable, end of the draft kind of guy that I would have been targeting because he might get to play some really good time with Malkin as well. But to start the year, definitely have a look at him. He's a draftable player for sure, because also at the end of the day, that is Guentzel's spot. Reevaluated in 12 weeks. Things could go better, things could go worse, meaning you might get really lucky if you get Riley Smith and Guentzel is out even longer. So there's a lot more to talk about with this Pittsburgh Penguins team, and I'm going to get to it all. But I wanted to talk about the keeper dynasty side of Guentzel very quickly because, and I'm going to pull this up. Guentzel had 36 goals last year, 37 assists in 78 games. He led the Pens in goals, third in points behind Sid and Gino, 11 power play goals, tied with for the team lead, and he had 6 game-winning goals. What I'm trying to say is his value is going up, and he's in a contract year. So when he comes back, whenever that is, he is definitely also a very, very good fantasy piece. He's proven it, and he's proven that chemistry with Sidney Crosby. So while I'm talking up Riley Smith and his initial value, don't forget that that's Guentzel's spot. But these are the kinds of situations that you capitalize on. Let's say you are a Guentzel owner in the keeper dynasty realm. Very likely that Riley Smith is draftable. I don't see him being a keeper in basically any format. He's going to be out in that pool. I say stash Guentzel, put him on the IR, put him in your IR slot. I wouldn't give up on him basically because of those caveats. That contract year, I think he's going to come back and blow the doors off, especially with the overall improved offense that Erik Karlsson is going to now bring, and we'll get to that in a minute. That's what I would do with him from the keeper dynasty side. Put him in the IR slot, and then maybe even go after Riley Smith. And then when Guentzel comes back, you're okay with maybe moving Riley Smith, package him in a deal. Or if you absolutely have to, you just put him on the bench and you use him as a very valuable fill-in. I look at this situation with that lens because at the end of the day, yeah, the Pittsburgh Penguins were very average on the penalty kill last year. I believe 16th, 17th in the league. Yeah, they were pretty average on the power play as well. And they were just kind of ho-hum average overall. But Erik Karlsson coming in, say what you will about the chemistry, say what you will about Letang's value, which we will get to. This makes them a better team. This makes that power play much more potent. And Kyle Dubas is working his magic, baby. And I'm going to talk about that as well because Leafs fans, do you miss your boy already? Do we miss our boy already? Holy crow, it might be a long, long year for Leafs fans. Steele tends to disagree with me on that. Anyway, we're not going down that road today. We're staying focused on the Penguins here to wrap up on Guentzel before I get to all the Erik Karlsson news and to bring it all back together. Right ankle surgery to be reevaluated in 12 weeks. I just broke down how I think you take care of him. If you are a GM owner of him in the keeper dynasty realm, keep him in that IR. Maybe take a look at Riley Smith as the fill-in and wait and be patient because when he comes back, I think this team is improved. All the pieces, Achari and otherwise up front, they're more balanced. Ryan Graves on the back end. Say what you will about Nedeljkovic. I actually like that move on the back end. Yeah, they had to give up Casey DeSmith to Montreal. This team got better is what I'm trying to spit out. So make sure you follow those rules. Big flip laying down for you. If you're feeling it, make sure you continue to listen to today's episode. I'll be right back after the break to talk about Erik Karlsson, this mega 3-team deal. But I just got to show love to all of our listeners, everydayers, and everyone in between for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Seriously, from the bottom of my heart and from Steele's, I know I speak for him on this one. We would be nowhere without our listeners and our supporters. Even throughout the summer, you guys continue to show us love. So make sure you smash that subscribe button, hit the follow button, and continue to leave us feedback. Slide into the DMs, people. They're always wide open for all of the fantasy advice that you need. So, speaking of which, I had to leave the big news to the end of the episode. Hope you've been feeling today's Monday solo episode with your boy Big Flip Livingstone. Erik Karlsson, 3-team deal, Montreal, San Jose, Pittsburgh. My goodness, Kyle Dubas. Hats off, claps up, stick taps. Kyle Dubas has made his mark already on this team. And I just need to start with this. Pittsburgh acquires a 100-point right-handed D-man in Erik Karlsson, the 3-time Norris Trophy winner, clearing up $3 million in cap space, and they only give up a first and second in draft capital. Welcome to the Dubas era, Pens fans. That's shout out to Cap Friendly. Good follow on Twitter as well. Hashtag follow Cap Friendly. Anyway, this is one more feather in the cap of Kyle Dubas. And what I want to just break down quickly, and first and foremost, do I think Erik Karlsson repeats 100 points? No. But I think his rejuvenated sense of getting near that cup, you are going to see another really, really good season for Erik Karlsson. And I'd be very comfortable making him one of the first 5 D-men off the board for sure. He is going to be, I think, definitely that power play 1 quarterback. Chris Letang was already in the media saying he's comfortable relinquishing that role. So I don't think that's a bold take. And the power play needed to be better, but also, what does Sidney Crosby do now, freeing up some space for him in front of the net? Erik Karlsson running that point. It could work out very nicely for this Pittsburgh Penguins team. Tristan Jarry, hopefully a full year of health. The fantasy impact, I think here, his value stays right where it's at. I actually like it to go up because he is now part of such a more balanced blue line. Look, the Pittsburgh Penguins exactly weren't great on the back end last year as well. But Erik Karlsson comes in and solidifies what should also be, it's going to be a battle in that Metro division. Pittsburgh, Washington, the windows for winning closing that I mentioned, they're going to be going toe-to-toe, and this is just one of those moves that, of course, Pittsburgh fans, they're hyped for. They should be hyped. Montreal also a part of this deal, and they pick up Casey DeSmith. And just to shift gears, super quickly, they pick up Jeff Petrie, Casey DeSmith, and Nathan Lagar, which is a prospect. San Jose gets a first-round draft pick, Michael Granlund, Jan Ruta, and Mike Hoffman. And finally, Pittsburgh, Erik Karlsson, Rem Pitlick, a prospect, and a third-round pick. Kyle Dubas deserves a lot of credit, and I think he's already getting it. And to stay focused on the fantasy lens here, Chris Letang, he takes a hit, right? Chris Letang's value has to take a hit here. He's already come out in the media and said he's okay taking that power play 2 role. He's okay letting Erik Karlsson do his thing. Letang had 41 points last year in 64 games. And in my opinion, even though his minutes are likely to be cut, both on the power play and just overall, he's still going to carry 20 minutes in ice time a night, minimum, in my opinion, 19, 20 minutes for sure, if not even a little more. He's still a very draftable D-man, especially in formats of, let's say, 10, 12, 14 GMs. Don't forget about Chris Letang because, he's off that top power play unit. But when you take a look at the second power play unit, and especially when Guentzel comes back and they can shift around some pieces, I don't exactly hate everything that they have to offer. Yeah, Jeff Carter has got a lot to be desired, but when it comes to the offense, the hands are still there. This is going to be big things for this offense. It's going to mean big things for a rejuvenation, I believe, in Malkin and Crosby because they've seen this front office respond and they're going for it. Erik Karlsson was the biggest name out there on the market. Kyle Dubas swung for the fences and he just cranked a dinger. So we have to keep your eyes on this kind of situation because, the on ice is the on ice. But the off-ice energy that's going on in Pittsburgh right now, you can't help but love it. And I'm telling you, bringing in guys on the bottom like Noel Acciari as well. Matt Nieto's in there. They're grinders, they're greasers, but they can also play hockey up front. So this team got more balanced. Yes, the Jake Guentzel injury, obviously. That hurts, but he's going to come back motivated, like I mentioned, that contract year. Let's keep it all tight on today's episode, my friends. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've been feeling the off-season content that Steele and I continue to roll out the door. Today's episode was all about the Washington Capitals and Pittsburgh Penguins. That Eastern Conference is going to be a bloodbath, and there's going to be a lot of really good teams left on the cutting room floor, on the outside looking in, but you can still tap into both of them for a lot of fantasy value. And of course, the biggest piece that we spoke about today, Erik Karlsson. My projection for Erik Karlsson still right in that 80-point realm. I could see something like, 18, 19 goals and something like, 65 plus assists right in that realm. So you got to be keeping your eye on him in the first 2 rounds of this upcoming draft. There's going to be a lot more coverage for these upcoming drafts for all you fantasy heads out there, all in the lead up to the upcoming fantasy draft. Monday, Wednesday through Friday for the rest of August. We'll be here, then ramping back up to 5 episodes a week for all of your draft needs. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you continue to check out the Locked On Network for all of your fantasy needs. NCAA, NHL, MLB, NFL. The season's on the way, baby. Let's get it going. Thank you for joining me for Monday's episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. We'll see you back here on Wednesday.